It was solely because the national preceptor had issued his decree that the daughters of the Shen family were fated to bring prosperity to their husbands. My eldest sister was married to the ailing young General Gu Yuan to ward off his illness through auspicious union. The young general immediately cast off his sickly pallor. Not only could he now lead troops into battle and cut down enemies, but every campaign ended in victory, forcing the enemy nation into successive retreats. My second sister was wed to the foolish young master of the chancellor's mansion. The young master was cured of his idiocy overnight. Not only did eloquent words flow from his lips like a river, but his painting skills reached a divine, otherworldly level, his precious work so coveted that even 1,000 gold could scarcely secure one. As for me, I was given to the dissolute heir of the Marquis's mansion. The heir who once knew nothing but wine, women, and idle pleasure underwent a complete metamorphosis. He successively cracked impossible cases, and both his reputation and official prestige soared with each passing day. Everyone said that marrying a daughter of the Shen family was tantamount to marrying good fortune itself. Yet no one could have foreseen that this fortune carried an expiration date. After 3 years of marriage, my eldest sister met with calamity. The young general fell from his horse in a tragic accident. The horse's hooves trampled his entire body, leaving him gravely wounded and permanently crippled. By the 3rd year of my second sister's marriage, the young master was struck on the head by a collapsing roof beam. His mind was damaged and he reverted to the fool he had once been. Sensing that the 3-year term for my own marriage was fast approaching its end, my husband grew visibly panicked. After nearly drowning during an outing with his mistress, he wrote a letter requesting divorce. "My virtuous wife, I beg you to release me. I do not wish to follow in the footsteps of your 2 brothers-in-law." I glanced at the woman standing beside him, dressed in men's attire yet unmistakably pregnant, and answered with perfect calm. "Husband, do you still remember what I told you on our wedding night?" He frowned, displeased. "That old matter? How could I possibly recall it? Back then, I told you that the daughters of the Shen family bring prosperity only to their own husbands," I reminded him calmly. If a husband entangled himself in romantic affairs outside the marriage, the deeper the involvement, the heavier the backlash would be. He had truly forgotten every word. A breeze swept through the garden, setting flowers and grass rustling. Xiao Shunan clutched the divorce letter tightly, as though afraid the wind might steal it away. He even prepared to draft another copy. "As for your parents, speak to them yourself." I quickly took the divorce letter and tucked it into my sleeve. "I will also need some time to arrange the return of my dowry." Seeing that I raised no fuss, he exhaled in relief. His gaze softened as it drifted to the woman beside him. I had no intention of pursuing whatever lay between the 2 of them. Upon returning to my courtyard, I immediately wrote to my eldest and second sisters to arrange a meeting for tomorrow. But the very next morning, mother-in-law intercepted me. Nanar was merely momentarily confused. "Do not hold it against him." As she spoke, mother-in-law grasped my hand, her tone earnest and pleading. "Your father-in-law already knows everything. We will give you a proper explanation." I had hoped for an amicable parting and tried to reason with her. "Have you considered that my departure might actually be better for my husband? You know the situations my eldest and second sisters face now." Mother-in-law cut me off. "It was merely a coincidence. Do not frighten yourself because of their misfortunes. Since you married into this family, my son has finally walked the righteous path. I am grateful to you. No matter what anyone says, you remain my only daughter-in-law." Seeing that I stayed unmoved, she tightened her grip further. "Or perhaps my son has done something to anger you, and that is why you are so determined to leave." I was uncertain how much she truly knew about the mistress. I intended to tell her everything, but before I could open my mouth, she launched into another round of persuasion. "Rua Qing, we women cannot afford to be so narrow-minded. You still have no children. Your father-in-law and I have refused to let him take concubines, yet a man's heart cannot be bound to one woman alone. Occasional dalliances are perfectly normal. Besides, once you bear children, you will even have to arrange concubines for him yourself. If you cannot be open-minded, how will you live in the future?" Her expression was grave, as though she genuinely believed every word. In that instant I understood. She knew everything. My heart clenched. I had no desire to continue the conversation. Just as I was about to excuse myself, a servant rushed in, pale and frantic. "The heir has been caught by the Marquis and dragged to the ancestral hall. He says he will administer family discipline." The Xiao family's discipline used a thorny rattan cane across the back, 30 lashes at the lightest. 50 at the heaviest until the victim was drenched in blood and unconscious. Xiao Shunan had been doted upon by the old Marquis and old Marchioness since childhood and had never suffered the slightest grievance. After their passing, he became an uncontrollable wastrel. Hearing that a Shen daughter could transform a man, father-in-law had begged for the marriage as a final gamble. Over the past few years, Xiao Shunan had changed beyond recognition, rising from idle playboy to a minor official in the Dali Temple, and eventually to Vice Minister of Justice, with a boundless future ahead. In barely 2 years, father-in-law had been immensely satisfied with the match he himself had chosen. Upon learning that his son had written a divorce letter of his own accord, he flew into a towering rage and invoked family discipline. By the time mother-in-law and I arrived, Xiao Shunan had already received numerous lashes. Seeing us, father-in-law paused and ground his teeth. "Still want the divorce? Divorce?" Xiao Shunan answered stubbornly. "Yes, I want a divorce." Father-in-law showed no mercy. Another lash cracked down. Xiao Shunan cried out in pain yet remained defiant. "Divorce, I want a divorce." Crack, crack. Mother-in-law's legs gave way at the sound of the whip. Supported by a maid, she staggered into the ancestral hall. At the sight of her son's bloodied back, she rushed forward and threw her arms around him, voice breaking with grief and fury. "Tell me, what on earth are you trying to do? You were living so well, why create all this trouble?" She whirled on father-in-law. "If there is something to discuss, speak civilly. This is your only son. How could you strike him so hard?" Father-in-law fell silent and dropped the whip. I stepped forward to check Xiao Shunan's wounds, but he shoved me away. "No need for your false kindness." His eyes burned with rage. "If you had left yesterday, would father and mother have been able to stop you? Why should I have to suffer this?" In that moment, the past 2 years of marital harmony and affection felt like a cruel joke. I had once believed he had simply changed his heart. Now I realized he had never truly cared for me at all. "Son, what nonsense are you spouting? Without Ru Qing, you would still be the useless wastrel you once were." Xiao Shunan roared, sweeping his furious gaze across the room before locking onto me. "Everyone keeps telling me to treat you well, that without you I would be nothing. But every achievement I have today came from my own efforts. What does it have to do with you? I am the heir of the Marquis's mansion. You are merely the daughter of a minor official. You climbed up to this position, so you should obey me in everything, not expect me to yield to you. Even without you, I can still solve cases and rise in rank." The final words were nearly a scream. Father-in-law and mother-in-law stood frozen, visibly shaken. The air turned thick and awkward. Staying would only breed more resentment. I took my leave and walked out. Even from a distance, I could still hear Xiao Shunan's unwilling roars fading behind me. My heart gradually calmed. I made my way to the mansion gates. When I returned home, my eldest and second sisters had already prepared the pastries we all loved. After we offered incense to our late mother, we gathered in the garden. "Eldest sister, how is the general's mansion treating you now?" Second sister asked, biting into a peach blossom pastry, her eyes filled with heartache. Gu Yuan, though crippled, remained lucid. He had brought back a concubine and a son from the border. Fearing he would have no legitimate heir, he insisted on registering the boy under my eldest sister's name, presenting him as the legitimate son who had fought heroically for the nation. From imperial kin to commoners, everyone pitied his injury. No one cared that he had deceived his principal wife, or that his private conduct was flawed. Some even said, "Fortunately, the general planned ahead and secured an heir for the mansion." I practice sword forms every day and listen to stories. It's not so hard to endure, eldest sister added, picking up a pastry and taking a delicate bite. "That woman he brought back, I wonder what she's thinking. These past few days she keeps hovering in front of me. It's maddening." "How did you deal with her?" I asked, curious. Eldest sister's temperament was straightforward. She despised pretension. No need to deal with her. When I'm in a good mood, I tease her a few words. When I'm not, I throw her into the lake to sober up. She ran to complain to mother-in-law. Mother-in-law told me to be magnanimous, so I threw open every door, summoned all the servants, and recounted the entire sordid affair from beginning to end. After all, I have no face left to lose. If they don't care about theirs, we might as well put on a show every single day. Second sister burst out laughing. "No wonder I've been hearing rumors that the general's mansion has turned into a theater. If eldest sister hadn't told me, I would have thought they actually hired a troupe. What kind of men did the 3 of us end up marrying? If even one of them had kept his promise, we wouldn't be in this mess." Eldest sister sighed and looked at me. "Is there truly no saving him anymore?" I nodded. The mistress is already pregnant. Today Xiao Shunan was punished severely. His injuries are heavy. I fear he will need time to recover before he can bring her into the mansion. But a pregnancy won't wait. How can he afford to recover slowly? Second sister shook her head, a shadow crossing her face. At this point, you should withdraw as soon as possible. Don't be like us who realized too late and now have no way out. After Li Wenheng reverted to idiocy, the Chancellor's mansion showed no outward anger toward me, but in secret they placed impossible demands on me, hoping my devoted care would awaken him again. My life has not been easy either. I knew the divorce letter from that morning had been confiscated by mother-in-law. I would find a chance to make Xiao Shunan write another, but since the marriage had been granted by imperial edict, divorce would be complicated. We could not rush. After sharing our troubles, we chatted for a long while and decided to stay the night together, each returning home the following morning. We had barely lain down when urgent knocking sounded at the door. A young servant from the Marquise's mansion, drenched in sweat, burst in without even completing his greeting. Young madam, the heir is in critical condition. The Marquis and Marchioness bid you return at once. Eldest sister and second sister stared at each other, disbelief plain in their eyes. Backlash? So quickly? After I left that morning, family discipline had stopped and physicians had been summoned to treat Xiao Shunan's wounds. Before long, infection set in. A high fever followed. Medicine brought no relief, his condition only worsened. By now the fever showed no sign of breaking, and he had slipped into unconsciousness. A line of physicians stood rigid, none daring to speak. Alan, dressed as a maid, stood behind mother. When she saw me, panic flashed across her face before she slowly placed a hand on her still flat belly, a smug smile forming. Mother-in-law, already displeased that I had left the mansion, frowned. But when she noticed me staring at Alan, guilt flickered in her eyes. She quickly softened and took my hand. Roqing, this is Alan. She is an orphan my son rescued. We pitied her circumstances and kept her to serve him. Now that he is unconscious, he needs proper care, so I decided she should stay. I showed no reaction. Alan stepped forward, curtsied, and kept one hand protectively on her belly. You must be exhausted, young madam. Go and rest. With me and Alan here, everything will be fine. Mother-in-law personally escorted me to the gate. I called you back for the sake of your reputation. Your husband lies gravely ill, yet you were away. If word spreads, it will reflect poorly on you. I neither argued nor stood on ceremony. I returned to my courtyard, but resentment burned in my chest and sleep would not come. 3 days passed. Xiao Shunan's fever still raged. He was my husband after all, so I occasionally checked on him. The moment I stepped into the courtyard, the heavy scent of medicine assaulted me. Mother-in-law wept into her sleeve while father-in-law sat in grim silence. Ever since the incident with Alan, I had resented and hated him, but I had never wished for his death. After a brief hesitation, I spoke. Father-in-law, mother-in-law, do you wish for my husband to recover soon? Of course, mother-in-law answered, wiping her tears. The sight of her son tore at my heart. If you want him to recover quickly, send Alan away. Best to rid us of the child in her belly as well. Father-in-law exploded. I thought Shunan was the muddle-headed one and punished him severely. I never expected you to be so jealous that you would force my son into such folly. Mother-in-law released my hand, her face darkening with fury. Roqing, your words are unacceptable. Now that you know the truth, you should treat Alan's child with magnanimity. How could you even suggest such a thing? I don't care whether you believe me or not, I replied. In short, if you want my husband to wake, do as I say. If father-in-law and mother-in-law would rather abandon your son to keep your grandchild, I have nothing left to say. I fell silent. Father-in-law pondered for a long moment before asking quietly, explain clearly, your fate is extraordinary. Brings prosperity to husband and family, we have witnessed it with our own eyes. But everything in this world demands balance. Gains require sacrifice. What do you want my son to sacrifice in return? Sacrifice what? Mother-in-law could no longer hold back. I can only speak of it to my husband, I replied. On our wedding night I already told him, yet he has clearly forgotten. Alan's face turned ashen. Cradling her belly, she knelt carefully before father-in-law and mother-in-law, tears streaming. Marquis Marchioness, please do not listen to the young madam's wild accusations. The child in this concubine's womb is the young master's flesh and blood, the bloodline of the Marquis mansion. How could it possibly harm him? Father-in-law wavered, glancing between me and Alan. Seeing an opening, Alan wept harder. The young madam has been married for years without issue. She must be jealous that I conceived first, So she seeks to take advantage of the young master's unconscious state to destroy me. If he wakes and learns the child is gone, how heartbroken he will be. Mother-in-law's resolve began to crack. I sighed. Whether you choose your son or gamble on your grandchild is your decision. My husband already has someone to care for him. I will take my leave. After 2 steps, I glanced back at Xiao Shunan's deathly pale face. An indescribable ache pierced my chest. For more than 2 years we had been husband and wife. Aside from the first few rebellious months, we had been inseparable. He read and wrote while I ground ink and poured tea. He analyzed cases while I devised strategies. I had once believed he was different from my brothers-in-law. It turned out I had been deceiving myself. Yet we had shared a marriage. Before leaving, I could not stop myself from adding one final sentence. If you return the divorce letter to me and Xiao Shunan and I sever all ties, perhaps there is still a chance to salvage something. Father-in-law and mother-in-law erupted. Throw her out. Alan, still kneeling, wiped her tears and looked at me with a mixture of triumph and provocation. Young madam, there is no need to make things difficult for the Marquis and Marchioness. This servant entered the mansion only to care for the young master. Once he recovers, if you wish to drive me away, I will leave without hesitation. Mother-in-law, terrified for the child, hurriedly helped Alan up and seated her comfortably. When she turned back to me, her eyes were filled with disappointment. Go. Pretend today's words were never spoken. We are still one family. Several more days passed. Physicians kept constant vigil. Xiao Shunan's fever finally broke, yet he remained unconscious. Father-in-law and mother-in-law berated the physicians for incompetence. The doctors trembled, exchanging helpless glances. In the awkward silence, one finally spoke. Alan has been pregnant and keeping vigil day and night. It has been too exhausting for her. Perhaps let her rest elsewhere for a while? Father-in-law understood the implication. After long consideration, he ignored Alan's tears and ordered her moved to the farthest courtyard from Xiao Shunan. The moment she left, Xiao Shunan showed signs of waking. Father-in-law and mother-in-law rejoiced and sent for me, announcing they had driven Alan away and would now have me personally tend to him. I looked up at the senior maid mother-in-law had dispatched. Is mother-in-law not afraid that if I anger my husband, he may never wake again? The maid stared, stunned by my bluntness, and promised only to relay my exact words. I paid her no mind and returned reviewing the account books. When mother-in-law arrived at my courtyard, fury still radiated from her. Ruching, I thought you were a good person. She launched straight into reproach. Do not speak of one Alan, even 3 or 4 would be perfectly normal. Clack. The abacus beads struck together with a sharp, decisive sound, cutting her off. On the day my husband fell unconscious, I already told you, marrying me and receiving the national prestar's blessing comes with conditions. What those conditions are, I cannot tell you. I can only say this. To prevent him from remaining unconscious for life, I cannot care for him. How could I be so cruel? He is my husband. Mother-in-law's chest heaved. The gentle demeanor she once wore had vanished. Our Xiao family was truly cursed for 8 lifetimes to have married you. It is not that I am cruel, I replied calmly. The conditions are simply like this. I remained perfectly calm. Do not vent your anger here. Return to your son and pray for his swift recovery. That would be far more useful. The news that mother-in-law had been so enraged she fainted and had to be carried from my courtyard spread like wildfire. Someone twisted and truncated the story until it reached the streets. The Shen daughter, relying on her fated prosperity, refused to obey her husband and showed disrespect to her in-laws. Even the misfortunes of my eldest and second sister's husbands were blamed on them. Rumors claimed eldest sister and second sister lacked virtue and were unworthy of the national preceptor's blessing, hence the backlash. Both the general's mansion and the chancellor's mansion believed every word. Eldest sister and second sister were punished by being forced to kneel in the ancestral hall to pray for their husband's recovery. Worried, I sent people to inquire. The replies were identical. No need to worry, we have ways to handle it. Not long after, eldest sister sent word. She had knelt in the ancestral hall less than an hour when disaster struck Gu Yuan's room. While intimate with his concubine, he fell from the bed. His previously sound leg snapped, aggravating old wounds. He screamed in agony all night. Eldest sister's blunt, carefree nature had never endeared her to the general's wife. Now that calamity followed calamity, the general's wife dropped all pretense. She declared eldest sister had offended the ancestors, and demanded she be sent to the manor. The general refused. The general's mansion's influence was waning daily. They dared not displease the emperor. For several days Gu Yuan's condition showed no improvement. The general's wife wept constantly. The general sighed endlessly. Seeing no other path, eldest sister approached them herself and begged them to write a divorce letter on their son's behalf. The couple hesitated. Eldest sister dropped her usual cold mask and wept pitifully, face streaked with tears. Although the national preceptor bestowed virtue upon his daughter-in-law, promising it would become fortune and bring prosperity to husband and family, he never specified whether backlash would follow prosperity. My husband had been improving, yet now his illness has worsened. Perhaps this is the backlash. If you fear divorcing me will anger the emperor, then let us go to the palace together and plead guilty. Beg his majesty to permit the divorce. Considering my husband's many military merits, the emperor will surely agree. The general and his wife deliberated 3 days before agreeing. The three entered the palace to plead guilty and request divorce. Commoners praised the general and his wife for understanding the greater good. They did not wish their young daughter-in-law bound for life to an invalid. Not only did they proactively issue the divorce letter, they also gave her more than half the rewards the young general had earned over the years as compensation, ensuring she could live comfortably thereafter. Eldest sister's reputation, however, plummeted. People called her a sycophant, heartless and ungrateful. They claimed that without her, Gu Yuan would have recovered, returned to the battlefield, and avoided his current fate. She was not a wife who brought prosperity but one who brought ruin. Eldest sister cared not at all. She packed her assets worth 10,000 strings of cash and moved to the newly renovated Hot Spring Manor outside the city. The first of us 3 sisters to escape the sea of suffering. Second sister also sent word. The chancellor's wife had always treated her kindly. Unable to bear watching the woman drown in sorrow daily, second sister finally spoke openly. If we drive away every woman Li Wenheng keeps outside, he may gradually regain his senses. The chancellor's wife was shocked that second sister knew, but said nothing and quietly had them all expelled. Thereafter Li Wenheng's idiocy eased and showed signs of recovery. Yet on the very day second sister knelt in punishment at the ancestral hall, with no mistress in his courtyard, an ambitious maid saw opportunity. She calculated that Li Wenheng still had no heir and second sister had borne no children in years. If she could conceive during this window, her future would be secure. Before she could succeed, another roof tile fell, striking Li Wenheng on the head. His idiocy worsened. Physicians despaired. The chancellor's wife flew into a rage, beat the maid to death, then sought second sister. Rowu, I know you are angry with that maid, but the most urgent matter is curing Wenheng. You once said he would recover. Second sister raised her head and asked evenly, as long as it makes my husband better, any method is acceptable? The chancellor's wife nodded. Second sister stated her condition clearly. Divorce her husband and invite imperial physicians to treat him devotedly. He would gradually improve. The chancellor's wife was stunned, then erupted. The marriage was granted by imperial edict. How dare you treat it as a joke? I thought you a virtuous wife who would support my son through thick and thin. I never expected such cold ruthlessness. I shall pretend I never heard these words. Do not mention them again. No matter what becomes of my son, you will remain in this mansion and go nowhere. The chancellor's wife, born to nobility and famed as a talented lady before marriage, was exceptionally learned. Few men could match her. She was intelligent and quickly grasped second sister's meaning. She immediately replaced every maid in Li Wenheng's courtyard with young male servants, ensuring no woman could approach him. She also confined second sister to the mansion, forbidding her from leaving, and demanded she remain by Li Wenheng's side at all times. Far from resenting the restrictions, second sister welcomed them openly, declaring she no longer cared for freedom. Indeed, not long after, a fierce debate erupted in the chancellor's mansion over whether to permit second sister's divorce, because Gu Yuan had shown clear improvement. Though still frail, sensation had returned to his crippled limbs. Imperial physicians said full recovery was impossible, but basic mobility could be restored. The general's wife made a special trip to the temple and donated a fortune in incense money. The general entered court beaming. The chancellor noticed. After a private conversation, the chancellor returned and discussed the matter with his wife. They decided to let second sister leave temporarily, severing karmic ties to seek a glimmer of hope. The chancellor's wife refused, insisting that once Li Wenheng no longer indulged in female company, he would improve on his own. Neither would yield. They finally compromised. Second sister could leave the mansion and live outside for a period. She happily agreed and moved in with eldest sister. The two invited me to join them, but the Marquis mansion remained in chaos. I could not leave. Xiao Shunan still had not woken. Mother-in-law remembered my words. She secretly gave Alan an abortifacient and sent her to a manor outside the city. 3 days later, Xiao Shunan awoke. Upon learning the child was gone, he flew into a murderous rage. Ignoring his still weak body, he stormed into my courtyard, face twisted with hatred. Shen Ruoqing, you are truly a venomous woman. He raised his hand to strike me, but the martial maid eldest sister had sent to protect me intercepted him effortlessly. You cannot bear children yourself, yet you refuse to let others bear them either, he screamed, dignity forgotten. You clearly received the divorce letter. Why haven't you left? Are you so shameless you intend to cling to me for life? The more he raged, the more vicious his words became. The commotion drew father-in-law and mother-in-law. When they arrived, Xiao Shunan still glared at me as though I were his mortal enemy. You have had enough. We might as well settle the divorce once and for all. The divorce letter you submitted was kept by mother. It is probably destroyed by now. Why not have my husband write another? Since the marriage was granted by imperial edict, divorce is not simple. Xiao Shunan understood perfectly. He seemed to regain his senses and looked toward his parents, gaze evasive, lips moving yet producing no sound. Ruoqing, what are you saying? Marital quarrels are common. Why speak of divorce? Mother-in-law stepped forward to take my hand in mediation, but I stepped back. Mother-in-law, my husband has already given his heart to another. If we divorce, whether he remarries or takes concubines, it will save everyone endless trouble. Although divorce is difficult for an imperially granted marriage, it is not impossible. Why not have my husband and I go to the palace tomorrow to beg for mercy? Mother-in-law's face turned to ice. She delivered a sharp slap across my cheek. I lowered myself to speak with you as a courtesy, not so you could climb over my head. Her voice was glacial. My son is right. You are nothing but a social climber who married into the Marquis mansion. Know your place. Do not think that because we treated you with some courtesy after you helped my son advance for 2 years, you may do whatever you please here. I had not expected the blow. For a heartbeat I was stunned. Xiao Shunan, initially shocked, then sneered with satisfaction. Father-in-law nodded in agreement with her, his gaze toward me openly displeased. In that moment, the storm of emotions in my chest suddenly stilled. My mind became crystal clear. That's right, one must always preserve face. As I spoke, I stepped directly before Xiao Shunan and delivered a resounding slap across his face. Mother-in-law cried out in horror. What are you doing? She rushed forward, hand raised, but before she could strike, my second slap had already landed. She frowned and tried again, yet I was faster. The third blow fell even harder. Xiao Shunan nearly collapsed. I seized his collar to keep him upright. Mother-in-law froze in terror. Father-in-law opened his mouth in fury, but I raised my hand once more. If either of you dares scold me even once, I will continue until I am satisfied. The two dared not speak, terrified their son would suffer further. I held Xiao Shunan firmly and looked at them both. In the beginning, it was not I who wished to marry, it was you who begged me. We have spoken to this point. Forcing ourselves to remain a family will only breed endless trouble. Why not discuss the divorce calmly? Father-in-law's expression darkened further. Suppressing his rage, he asked, what exactly do you want? I want only the divorce, nothing else. The marriage was granted by imperial edict, father-in-law explained, forcing patience into his voice. Divorce requires the emperor's approval. We cannot rush. Release Shunan. We will handle this at our discretion. Mother-in-law looked ready to object, but father-in-law's stern glance silenced her. Now that they had softened, I yielded as well. In the beginning, many sought this marriage, yet the emperor chose the Marquis's mansion. Given that the Marquis still holds some favor before His Majesty, he should be able to obtain imperial consent. I await your good news. With that, I pushed Xiao Shunan forward into father-in-law's arms. The sudden movement tore open his wounds. He grimaced in pain. I turned without another glance and returned to my room to pack. Early the next morning, 2 unfamiliar old maids blocked my door. Young madam, this is a gift from the old Marchioness. One respectfully presented a book on women's conduct. The old Marchioness said you were truly excessive yesterday. You are to remain in your room for the next few days and reflect calmly. Is there anything else? I will not accept the book. I looked up at them. Mother-in-law surely said more than that. The 2 maids exchanged glances. One hesitated. The old Marchioness has selected 2 maids for the young master. Once he recovers, they will be elevated to concubines. She said you must be magnanimous, I understand. I cut her off with a light, mocking smile. 2? With my husband's status, at least 4 would be necessary. After finishing my words, I turned and walked back inside. If the main gate was blocked, I could always climb the wall. When I met my eldest and second sisters, the two of them were lounging comfortably, eating grapes while listening to an opera tune. Second sister grumbled, "Eldest sister, tell me, isn't my mother-in-law incredibly clever?" I only hinted twice and she guessed everything. Eldest sister shot her a sideways glance, her tone half scolding, half affectionate. "You knew she was sharp, yet you still ran your mouth. Now you're suffering for it, aren't you?" Second sister fell silent. Then, as if resigned, she sank back into her chair, sighed, and said, "I only thought the matter between Li Wenheng and me had nothing to do with her. Now that he's suffering the backlash, that should be enough. She always treated me decently in the past. Helping her one last time wouldn't have hurt. Who knew she would suddenly change? A son is flesh and blood. A daughter-in-law is an outsider who came later. If she doesn't suit, she can always be replaced. Between the two choices, she naturally chose her son. It's not that she changed, it's that I was too easily fooled." Eldest sister's blunt words struck straight to the heart. Second sister said nothing more, though sadness lingered in her eyes. She showed no regret. Eldest sister sighed, her voice softening. "I'm not blaming you, I just hate seeing you suffer." She paused. "Don't worry about me. The medicine you asked me to find, I've already obtained it." She took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to second sister. "It's been tested. It won't harm the body, but the effect lasts only 3 days. After taking it, your body will show false signs of infertility. Li Wenheng still has no heir. The Li family won't accept him remaining childless forever. They already know the backlash originates from you. If you pretend to be barren, they'll eventually let you go of their own accord." Second sister accepted the bottle, sniffed it, and wrinkled her nose. This medicine is truly bitter. She had already told the chancellor's wife that she could not bear children. 3 years without issue had already made the woman suspicious. Now, after inviting a physician to take her pulse, the chancellor's wife believed it completely. Seeing Li Wenheng's idiocy greatly diminished, she felt both joy and worry. She had tried probing second sister for ways to break the backlash, but received no answers that satisfied her. During her final probe, second sister simply produced the divorce letter. "At this point, I won't hide anything from you. There is no way to resolve this. If he becomes involved with anyone else, the backlash is inevitable." In the end, between second sister and an heir, the chancellor's mansion chose the heir. The chancellor's wife promised that once Li Wenheng fully recovered, she would allow second sister to leave. 3 months later, while playing beside the rockery, Li Wenheng suddenly woke. He looked at second sister with complete bewilderment. "Wife, why are we here? Wasn't I painting at Moon-Gazing Pavilion?" Seeing Li Wenheng's clear, lucid expression, second sister stood frozen. Her husband had recovered, yet the idiocy had returned? Li Wenheng could hardly believe it. "If you don't believe me, ask your parents. They've been worried for a long time. They'll be overjoyed to know you've recovered. We can discuss everything else later. Go see your parents first." Li Wenheng didn't think twice. He turned and headed toward the front courtyard. Sister watched his retreating figure for a long while before sighing and walking in the opposite direction. Her luggage had long been packed. After leaving the mansion through the back gate, she sent a letter each to me and eldest sister, then traveled south alone. Returning to her old hometown, second sister had always been innocent by nature. When she first learned she was to marry Li Wenheng, a man with a crooked eye and twisted mouth, who drooled when he spoke, she had been anxious every single day. Only after the wedding did she discover that Li Wenheng was not only strikingly handsome, but his so-called idiocy was merely late intellectual development. His temperament was childlike, yet he never caused unreasonable trouble. The two of them played together, practiced calligraphy and painting together, and lived quite happily. Because second sister's artistic talent far surpassed his, he admired her immensely and pestered her daily to teach him. Over time they grew perfectly in sync, and their affection deepened with each passing day. Yet after Li Wenheng recovered, his poetry and painting skills advanced rapidly. He gradually gained fame, and his social circle expanded. Cracks began to appear in their relationship. On the day of his accident, it happened to be exactly 3 years since their marriage. Second sister had personally prepared a meal and carefully selected fruits, intending to talk with him, only to receive news that he was injured. At first she thought it was an ordinary wound that would heal with time, but as days passed with no improvement, doubt took root. After secretly investigating, she discovered the mistress and learned the entire truth. "I had planned to climb the wall to meet second sister one last time. The moment I reached the base of the wall, I sensed something was wrong. Upon closer inspection, I realized father-in-law and mother-in-law had brought more than 10 servants and surrounded my courtyard. Mother-in-law spoke first. Shenroqing, my son is the heir and your husband. He merely kept one maid. How could you harm him to this extent? I was baffled. Only after questioning did I learn the truth. Xiao Shunan had been paralyzed on one side of his body. Mother-in-law had originally intended to find only 2 concubines for him. But after hearing my casual remark that day, she had angrily added 2 more. The moment Xiao Shunan recovered, she sent them to him. For several consecutive days he indulged in their gentle embraces, forgetting heaven and earth. Alan, still at the manor, somehow heard the news and escaped back. Weeping, she poured out her grievances to him. Her frail, pitiful appearance instantly rekindled his compassion. The 2 of them rekindled their old flame in the warmth of the bed. In their excitement, both fell from the bed. Alan injured her waist while Xiao Shunan ended up paralyzed on one side. I haven't seen my husband in days. How could I possibly have harmed him? I looked at father-in-law and mother-in-law calmly. Besides, I said it long ago, gains always come with a price. Judging by today's situation, I fear the 2 of you never even asked what price my husband must pay. Father-in-law and mother-in-law stared at each other, speechless. Actually, this matter is easily resolved. While they were still stunned, I continued, give me the divorce letter. Once Xiao Shunan and I sever all ties, the price that must be paid will also be cut off. Don't even think about it. You've harmed my son to this state and now want to wash your hands of everything? How could anything in this world be so easy? Mother-in-law ground her teeth. I ordered you confined to your courtyard, yet you go out every day without the slightest regard for the Marcus's mansion rules. Today I will teach you a proper lesson. Mother-in-law, I cut her off. What if the next backlash after you punish me leaves Xiao Shunan not merely half paralyzed, but completely paralyzed or dead? Don't talk nonsense. Mother-in-law shouted. In her panic, she could think of no rebuttal and turned to father-in-law for help. Father-in-law remained calmer. What exactly do you want? I've said it many times, I want a divorce. You refused. You insisted on stopping me. If you hadn't interfered back then, Xiao Shunan wouldn't be in this state. Is there truly no room left for negotiation? Father-in-law frowned, still stubborn. Unless you're willing to let Xiao Shunan suffer misfortune every single day. A vicious glint flashed across his face. Aren't you afraid I'll kill you? As long as the Marquis can bear the consequences, that's all that matters. I smiled. Xiao Shunan has already come to this because of his broken promises. If I die, I won't say another word. After all, I don't know what will happen to him if I truly die. Father-in-law fell silent. He dared not gamble. In the end, he promised to enter the palace, soon to plead guilty. Since being confined, I slept until the sun was high every day. This time, I had completely torn away all pretense with father-in-law and mother-in-law. I thought I would become invisible within the mansion. To my surprise, the very next morning, before dawn, a maid woke me from deep sleep. Young madam, the 3rd young master of the Li family has come to see you. I sat up with a start. After dressing, my mind gradually cleared. I told her, I won't see him. He's only here to ask about second sister's whereabouts. But the Marquis and Marchioness are both present and specifically sent you to invite me. If I refuse you, if you don't go, this servant. The maid dropped to her knees, meaning if I didn't agree, she wouldn't get up. This matter has nothing to do with you. I don't want you implicated for no reason. So I agreed and headed to the front courtyard. When Li Wenheng saw me, joy lit his face. He spoke quickly. Little sister, do you know where your second sister went? Yesterday I returned from seeing my parents, and she was gone. If I did something wrong that angered her, just tell me. I'll apologize and reflect. Why did she leave like this? What does she mean by it? 3rd young master, why bother deceiving yourself and others? What exactly have you done? How much does second sister know? Didn't the chancellor's wife tell you? I showed no mercy as I tore away his false mask. Li Wenheng was speechless for a long moment. Finally he said, it was only an act to get through the situation. I never thought she would take it so seriously. An act to get through the situation? I laughed coldly. Second sister's talent in poetry and painting is no less than yours. If she were outside socializing with friends, forgetting to return, even staying out all night, would you think nothing of it? She is a woman. How can a woman so what? Must she only serve as a stepping stone, lifting her husband higher and higher while she herself sinks lower and lower? Just from what you said today, I will never tell you where second sister went. You are unworthy. I cut off Li Wenheng and voiced everything I had long held in my heart. If you've already made a promise, don't use the excuse of acting to get through the situation to justify your romantic entanglements. Li Wenheng stood there for a long time, unable to recover. He seemed regretful, yet also unwilling to accept it. Knowing he could get nothing more from me, he left dejectedly. Father-in-law and mother-in-law looked stunned, as if seeing me for the first time. I didn't know when Xiao Shunan had also arrived. Leaning on a cane, his face was complicated. It's been a while since I last saw him. He had lost a great deal of weight, his complexion deathly pale, looking extremely frail. Ruoqing, has my husband remembered what I said on our wedding night yet? I interrupted. He choked on the words. If my husband remembers, the illness should resolve on its own. The first light of dawn was faint, carrying a hint of chill. I returned to sleep a while longer and didn't wake until evening. Noise drifted in from outside the courtyard. Eldest sister had sent a maid to find me, but the servants guarding the gate had stopped her. When the maid saw me emerge, relief flooded her face. She spoke hurriedly. Third young lady, second young lady has been taken back to the Chancellor's mansion by third young master. Eldest young lady has already rushed over and sent me to inform you. Alarmed, I quickly straightened my clothes and hurried toward the Chancellor's mansion. I had expected to face difficulties entering, but the servants were already waiting at the gate. When eldest sister and I arrived, the Chancellor's wife was also present, her face filled with despair. She had clearly learned the full truth of the backlash from the Chancellor and his wife. Eldest sister, little sister. The moment we stepped inside, second sister rushed toward us, tears streaming down her face. Li Wenheng stared at his empty arms, momentarily dazed. He tried to pull second sister back, but the Chancellor blocked him. Wenheng, the Chancellor said sternly, you and second young lady Shen have already divorced. What you did today was already inappropriate. Don't cause more trouble. Li Wenheng's father refused to accept it. I don't want a divorce. Shut up, the Chancellor snapped. You know perfectly well what you've done. If Ruwu still holds any old affection and doesn't turn you back into a fool, that is already a kindness. Don't pester her anymore. The Chancellor is right, eldest sister said. My second sister and third young master had no marital fate to begin with. Ending it now is simply cutting losses in time. Eldest sister looked at the Chancellor, neither fawning nor flattering. Glancing at third young master's expression, she added, I hope your excellency will keep third young master properly disciplined in the future. Don't let him openly abduct respectable women into the mansion again like he did today. That is only proper. The Chancellor nodded. Eldest sister then turned to father-in-law. Marquis, you once promised my third sister you would request an imperial decree for divorce. How has that progressed? Father-in-law sighed and slowly took the divorce letter from his chest. He was about to hand it to eldest sister when Xiao Shunan stopped him. Father, you can't, I remember now. He sounded agitated. I remember the promise I made on our wedding night. These past days were my mistake. From now on, I will change. Xiao Shunan looked at me, his eyes brimming with affection. Shunan, enough. The fortune of the Shen daughters, we cannot bear it. Father, do you truly want a son who is a dissolute wastrel despised by the world? I will truly change. From now on, Ruoqing and I will live well together. I will never again dally with flowers and moonlight. Ha! Eldest sister burst out laughing. Young Master Xiao, in the end, is it my little sister you can't bear to part with, or the fortune she brings you? Xiao Shunan remained silent. Eldest sister continued, if you break your promise, the fortune will dissipate and misfortune will cling to you. Keeping my little sister is merely using her fortune to start over. Once you rise in rank and reputation again, can you truly control yourself? He still stared at me in silence, then looked around at everyone, as though he had made an enormous decision. He raised his hand to swear an oath, but father-in-law was faster. He grabbed Xiao Shunan's hand and said helplessly, the Xiao family has no one who keeps his word. If you swear today and break it again tomorrow, circling back like this, what are your mother and I supposed to do? Xiao Shunan's father slumped. I don't want to become useless again. Besides, if father hadn't beaten me so severely, how would I have been gravely injured? How would my body have become this weak? Crack! Mother-in-law stepped forward and slapped Xiao Shunan hard across the face. Grinding her teeth, she said, you committed the wrong first. Your father only did this because he wanted to keep her. Now you're using it as an excuse to complain? Have you truly lost all sense of right and wrong? Xiao Shunan lowered his head and said nothing. He watched helplessly as the divorce letter passed from eldest sister's hands into mine. Though unwilling, he dared not argue further. Eldest sister, second sister, and I returned to the mansion to pack. On the way we encountered Gu Yuan being carried over. With no more karmic backlash between him and eldest sister, and receiving devoted care from the imperial physicians, his injuries had improved significantly. He could now exert a little strength with his arms, and sensation was returning to his legs. When he saw eldest sister, he grew somewhat agitated. "Was it truly because I took a concubine and had a child that all this happened to me?" he asked anxiously. At this point, eldest sister saw no need to lie. She answered calmly, "Right after we married, I told you, if one day you wish to take a concubine, inform me first. Why didn't you tell me?" Gu Yuan's face turned deathly pale. "When mother-in-law brought her over, why didn't you say anything to me either?" His face grew even whiter. I was drunk. I didn't think much of it. Mother brought her to care for me. General, how impressive, one drunken night lasted 2 whole years. Eldest sister exhaled slowly and continued. Everyone knows the Shen daughters received virtue bestowed by the national preceptor. But no one knows why that virtue fell upon the 3 of us sisters. In his later years, the late emperor lived in extravagant excess. For his favored consort, he rebuilt palaces on a grand scale, raising taxes several times over until the people everywhere seethed with resentment. The national preceptor remonstrated in vain, and was instead sentenced to death. Only because a disciple risked his life to protect him did he escape the palace. That night they fled to Red Shore and repelled the pursuing soldiers. But none of the disciples survived, and the national preceptor was gravely wounded. At that time, our mother's merchant ship had just docked. She rescued the national preceptor. The national preceptor said his time was up. In gratitude, he asked mother to transport his body back to his hometown for burial. In return, he could bestow half a lifetime of his virtue upon our father. That virtue could transform into fortune, protecting the entire family for a lifetime of smooth sailing. Mother agreed to take him home, but she only wanted to keep the virtue for the 3 of us sisters. The national preceptor refused. Mother argued with reason. In the end, they reached an agreement: the virtue would be given to the daughters. After marriage, it would manifest as bringing prosperity to husband and family. After eldest sister finished, Gu Yuan was silent for a moment. Then he erupted in violent fury. The original decree never mentioned backlash. The national preceptor was a man of great virtue. Why would he write such heartless backlash? Causing you to lose your life like this? What did you do to him? Eldest sister's emotions remained steady as she continued. After the national preceptor finished writing the decree and handed it to mother, she asked, "If my daughters bring prosperity to their husbands' families, yet those families are not benevolent and treat my daughters poorly, what then will become of those families?" The national preceptor closed his eyes and did not answer. Mother was resolute. "Who my daughters marry in the future must be wholehearted and devoted. If they violate the agreement and enjoy the bestowed virtue, they must return it in full." The national preceptor still refused. Mother was about to tear up the decree on the spot and leave. "I want my daughters to live smoothly for a lifetime, not to pay with their entire lives for a stranger's family and still not die a decent death. If the benefit of this decree is merely a gamble on my son-in-law's character, then I would rather not have it." The national preceptor, barely clinging to life, looked at the desolate Red Shore and realized he might not meet another person. He had no choice but to agree to mother's demand, and added the backlash clause on the back in tiny, easily overlooked script. After bringing the decree home, father flew into a rage and blamed mother for not seeking fortune for him, but instead giving it to his 3 daughters. Mother didn't argue with him. She sold part of the family land and shops. After asking the 3 of us our preferences, she invited renowned teachers. Eldest sister liked martial arts, so a martial instructor was hired. Second sister liked poetry and painting, so a female tutor was invited. I liked commerce and calculation. Mother taught me personally. The late emperor passed away. The new emperor, in mourning the national preceptor, caused father to develop crooked ambitions. He went to the capital and spread word of the decree, attracting countless people with ulterior motives to seek marriage alliances. The general's mansion, wanting to use the marriage as a lucky charm for the dying Gu Yuan, entered the palace to request an imperial decree granting the marriage. Unexpectedly, Gu Yuan truly recovered soon after the wedding. With the general's mansion as backing, father received a minor post in the Ministry of Works. More people came seeking marriage. Second sister also became a sacrificial pawn. Mother learned of this and was so enraged she wanted to sever ties with father. She didn't want eldest sister and second sister to fall into the fire pit, but she was powerless to change anything. Later she tried to protect me, but her lowly status gave her words no weight. Mother died filled with unwillingness and resentment. Before her death, she dragged father along, forbidding him from continuing to exploit the three of us for profit. So just because I have a child, you wanted me to lose everything at my most glorious moment? Gu Yuan's face twisted with rage. He roared, "We were husband and wife once. How could you be so ruthless?" He had been injured during his triumphant return to court. His horse suddenly panicked and threw him. Unable to return to the battlefield, the emperor bestowed countless rewards but no promotion. Precisely because we were once husband and wife, I didn't want to make everything too ugly. Eldest sister finished speaking calmly, lowered the carriage curtain, and signaled for the carriage to continue. The anger on Gu Yuan's face gradually gave way to regret. He still wanted to pester her, but the concubine he had summoned blocked his path. "General, do you truly intend to drive us mother and child away? I have no skills, and the child is still young. How will we live in the future?" The concubine clung to Gu Yuan's leg, weeping. "The principal wife has already left. She won't be coming back." The concubine's cries were loud. Passers-by stopped to watch the spectacle. Gu Yuan had just managed to soothe the concubine when the swaddled child beside them began wailing loudly. Both furious and ashamed, he ignored the concubine entirely, paid no attention to the crying child, and fled in panic. News that the three Shen sisters had caused their husbands' mansions to fall into chaos before divorcing spread throughout the streets and alleys in a single day. Wherever we went, people pointed and whispered. Especially when I led cart after cart of assets out of the Xiao mansion, it caused an even greater stir. Some, claiming righteousness, tried to seize the goods. Fortunately, the armed escorts arranged by eldest sister acted in time, and no incident occurred. We returned to eldest sister's manor and began planning our futures. Eldest sister said she wanted to go to the border and spread the virtue bestowed by the national preceptor. Since it could bring prosperity, it shouldn't be limited to one small family. Those of one heart could become family. She wanted to bestow this blessing upon more people, upon those more deserving. Second sister had no grand ambitions. She usually only liked writing and painting. Now she had discovered a new hobby, writing Hoban stories. Stories about noble ladies and their live-in sons-in-law, about women standing alone in the world. As for me, I only liked working the abacus. From childhood to now, that had never changed. I wanted to continue opening shops, hoping that one day the Shen family's stores would spread across the entire empire. Wherever one went, people would say, "The Shen family's goods are high quality and fairly priced." Time flew. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. During that period, the emperor passed away. The new emperor ascended the throne and ushered in a completely new era. At the border appeared a female general of peerless martial skill and outstanding strategy. More importantly, whenever one fought alongside her, no matter how perilous the situation, she could always turn danger into safety. In the capital, a writer of a different kind also emerged. In her books, beauties did not necessarily have to match talents, and noble ladies were not limited to one path of marriage. Talented men who found a wealthy wife and climbed high often turned heartless afterward, refusing to acknowledge the path they had taken. Women did not need to rely on men. Learning a skill could support an entire family. Thus, women supported her fervently and pursued self-improvement, while men cursed her vehemently, accusing her of overturning the natural order. Yet no matter how much she was scolded or slandered, it could not stop her weapon from being adapted into operas. The song spread from village to town, entering more and more ears, giving countless women trapped in hardship the courage to stand up and resist, to walk an entirely different path. It could not stop her from marrying a handsome live-in husband, bearing a pair of dragon and phoenix twins, and living freely and comfortably. It could not stop her from opening the empire's first library for women after earning a fortune, teaching women to read and write so they could see a wider world. As for my shops, they had already opened across the north and south. I hired people without regard to gender, judging only ability. The number of female managers even surpassed male ones at one point. Walking the streets, when recognized, no one called the Shen daughters husband-ruining or family-destroying anymore. The slanders and curses had turned into welcoming smiles. The border achieved the greatest victory since the dynasty's founding. The enemy nations surrendered and signed a 30-year peace treaty. Second sister and I entered the city to shop, preparing to welcome eldest sister home. Inside a shop we were recognized. The person recounted in vivid detail the current circumstances of our former husbands' families. Gu Yuan, hearing that eldest sister held great prestige at the border, felt both anger and regret. He blamed the concubine for seducing him and causing later disaster. After coming to despise both concubine and child, he fell into decline. He drank all day to numb himself, and his body completely collapsed. The general and his wife, unwilling to be pointed at in their old age, resigned and took their grandson back to their hometown, no longer caring whether Gu Yuan lived or died. Wenheng still obsessed over poetry and painting, but his works were mediocre, lacking any spiritual essence. He gradually faded into obscurity. Unable to accept falling from such heights after failing to win second sister back, he locked himself in his room, ate irregularly, and practiced painting and calligraphy bitterly. Now his figure was gaunt. Though not mad, he was nearly possessed by his obsession. The fortunes of others in the Chancellor's mansion were no better. The Chancellor held differing views from the new emperor and showed signs of being sidelined. The eldest son had been demoted for poor performance and might never regain his post. The Chancellor's wife wept daily, regretting that she hadn't noticed the signs earlier and fallen into today's situation. The Marquis' mansion was even more shrouded in gloom. After Xiao Shunan became half-paralyzed during intimacy with his concubine, a psychological shadow took root. Even after his body recovered, he no longer dared approach women. The Marquis' mansion, unwilling to end the family line, tried every method but failed. Xiao Shunan also discovered his case-solving ability had declined. Clues he once easily interpreted now led to constant mistakes. Causing no small amount of trouble, he finally faced reality. Without me, he could not reach high positions. Yet he still possessed some self-awareness. Knowing his official career was hopeless, he proactively requested the emperor's permission to resign as vice minister and return to being a wastrel as before, only this time, instead of merely indulging in pleasure without touching gambling or women, he now associated with a crowd of dubious friends, showing no restraint, trending toward complete degeneration. The Marquis' mansion's wealth was squandered to nothing. Creditors came daily, making life unbearable for the Marquis and his wife. The storyteller spoke vividly, yet neither second sister nor I felt much turmoil. After all, what became of them had nothing to do with us from the moment of divorce. The day before eldest sister's triumphant return to the capital, a special guest arrived at our home. The 9th prince of years past was now the son of heaven. His appearance remained as handsome and refined as before, only now carrying added dignity and authority. Third young lady, it has been a long time. Before I married Xiao Shunan, I had met him once. At that time, the fated prosperity of my eldest and second sisters had already been proven, and the late emperor had intended to marry me to him. To show his regard, the emperor personally brought many fine gifts. He was a modest gentleman, with a temperament as mild as polished jade, yet he already had a principal wife and several concubines. I spoke my thoughts frankly. He did not press the matter, and the marriage alliance thus never came to pass. Not long after, I received the imperial decree marrying me to Xiao Shunan. When I rejected him, though he showed nothing on his face, he must have felt some unwillingness in his heart. Seeing his current calm and composed expression, I felt somewhat more at ease. I bowed respectfully, but he raised a hand to stop me. Today, I have come to see third young lady because I have a matter to discuss. My grandfather, in his later years, exhausted the national treasury. The late emperor, upon ascending, desperately wished to turn the situation around, but foreign enemies lurked and wars dragged on endlessly. Military expenditures were enormous, finances severely in deficit. He was powerless to act. Now that foreign enemies have surrendered and the realm is stable, this is the perfect time to develop the economy and improve people's livelihoods. I wish to borrow your fortune to restore the national treasury to abundance as soon as possible. I hereby appoint you imperial merchant, granting you treatment equivalent to a third-rank official. With such favorable conditions, you have no reason to refuse. Before leaving, I escorted him to the door. He suddenly turned back, his gaze profound. Third young lady, is there already someone in your heart? Back then, when you rejected the marriage alliance, I thought. He sighed softly and said frankly, never mind, those are matters of the past. No need to mention them again. In the future, if third young lady truly has someone in her heart, no matter who it is, I will certainly grant my blessing. Thank you, Your Majesty, I replied respectfully. From now on there is no need for such formality, he said. Third young lady, we shall meet again tomorrow. The great army returned triumphantly. The emperor personally left the city to welcome them. Civil and military officials stood in orderly rows before the city gate. He stood at the very front, personally helping several high-ranking generals dismount, including eldest sister. Second sister and I stood among the crowd. At a glance I saw eldest sister, her face weathered by wind and sand, and felt both heartache and joy. The emperor's gaze swept the surroundings. I inadvertently looked up and met his eyes. In that instant my heart suddenly fluttered for reasons I couldn't name. I quickly lowered my head. When I looked up again, the army had already entered the city. The emperor made an exception and allowed second sister and me to attend the